Hey, welcome back to Gear Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Cash, and here at Gear Talk, we are connecting reliability professionals with reliable information. And today we have a special treat because I've got one of my buddies from the Middle East that came over, and he's going to talk to us about kind of the state of reliability that he sees. You know, we get to talk a lot of people domestically or maybe through the United States and Canada and stuff, but this one, we're actually going to start to see some of the different demographics out there and maybe some of the different geographies and how reliability actually gets ingrained into their cultures. So without further ado, Mina, we got the CEO of Prime Gear here. So thank you for coming over.
Thank you very much for having me, Wes. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's always good to see you. I mean, we've known each other for quite a while now. And I mean,
almost 10 years now.
I know it's been a decade. And I always, am fascinated by, kind of your stories, what you're butting up against, because some of it is similar to what we run into. Some of it's completely different. And, maybe before we dive into that, though, one of the goals of this podcast is for the people to understand, where the information's coming from. We're connecting people here. So, Mina, if you don't mind, maybe give us a little bit of introduction. What do you do? How'd you get into reliability? All that.
Absolutely. So I'm originally a mechanical engineer. I also carry a master and a PhD in engineering. Mm-hmm. But I started as a vibration analyst. That was one of my first jobs that I actually did.
Yeah.
So how I got into reliability. So I got a contract with my company that we were helping a facility that manufactured beverages, that we need to improve their reliability, their OEE, all the KPIs that
they had metrics that they were trying to achieve.
Yeah. And for 3 years, we was achieving very well. And then we got stuck, totally stuck. We couldn't do much. And so we did what any reliability guy do, failure analysis. Okay. It is our list of failures that's causing the downtime. Let's understand those, what's happening there. So I was very knowledgeable about reliability at that point of time, but what I lacked
is focused a lot on vibration,
condition monitoring techniques, direct fault finding. That's what. Okay. So I find that 83% of all those faults that have been bugging me for a year now is lubrication related one way or another. Okay. I asked myself a question. Okay, what do you know about lubrication? At that point of time, it was viscosity. That's it.
Kind of the basics there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I started learning, and I took it seriously, took my courses, and it opened a complete new universe of how you could improve your equipment reliability and actually eliminate those faults and defects totally.
Yeah.
And the biggest challenge that we saw that we know, but we didn't know, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, most people think that lubrication is, very simple. Oil is oil and grease is grease, and they don't understand the nuance. Maybe they've never actually been trained or enlightened to what good lubrication looks like.
Exactly.
And it has a huge impact.
Yeah.
So started in vibration, figured out 83% of what you were seeing. You're like, well, this is attributed to lubrication. And then you went deep into the weeds of lubrication. You're one of the contributors to ICML 55, which is a global standard for lubrication excellence. So, I mean,
yeah,
you really took a deep dive into this.
Yeah, exactly. I always work with the troubleshooting and root cause analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So being in the Middle East, this is usually where customers and people call me in. They have a machine, anyway, from a small pump all the way to a gas turbine broken into bits and pieces. And the crime investigation starts.
Right.
Mina, you need you to come in because we need to know and figure out what happened.
Right.
So you have to be very soon on the site so they don't clean all the evidence up. That's the most important thing.
It's a crime scene, right? We've got to preserve the evidence.
Exactly. You get all the broken machine data. And this took me in various ways, not only oil analysis and filter analysis and weir debris analysis. We started depending on material analysis and failure analysis from the point of metallurgy.
Yeah, I was going to say you're looking at metallurgy and everything that may be on there.
Yeah, and I did a lot of cases. I mean, I have a very long experience with that. So that's what I've been doing for the last more than a decade now.
Yeah.
And so the ICML board reached me out. I have so many cases about root cause analysis. Why don't you contribute and write the troubleshooting root cause scheme? So how you should actually do the RCA. How you should have a system that give you consistent results. Because the point about RCA, you only know that you get it right if it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, that's true.
It happens again. Okay, let's go again and see what did you miss. So this is a difficult challenge in RCA because I see many RCA reports that jump to conclusions.
Well, sure.
Okay. Or he just to say, okay, this case I have seen it before 2 times ago. No. Every case could be a little bit different or very different. It depends that you have to have a system that makes sure that you don't fall in this kind of rush to conclusion mistakes.
Whenever I'm brought in for any root cause analysis, failure investigation, that's one of the biggest things is you want to slow down. You want to try to eliminate any bias from your mind. You don't want to just go in and say, I've seen this before. It's going to be, because there may be clues, there may be little things here and there that don't line up with what you've seen previously.
Exactly.
I mean, some things are different. And yes, there is, survivorship bias. And like you said, you only got it right when it doesn't happen again. So I love that. Now, when it comes to, working with your facilities, when I think about, the Middle East, I think it's heavily dominated by oil and gas, petrochemical. I guess, is this, majority of your customers, or you servicing a wide swath of industry? What is that?
Yeah, I do a lot of wedges. It's from oil and gas upstream all the way to refineries. And we do also a lot of food and beverages, engineered steel and cement also, because all those construction materials are quite heavy in energy demand.
Sure.
So basically, it's a good business that you open a facility in one of those Middle East countries that we have abundant, cheap energy, cheaper than other places in the world, and to just get the end product to your country. So, yeah, we got a lot of that: cement, steel, oil and gas, polymers, chemicals, food and beverage, because we have a good population to feed. So, into food and beverage facilities, also we work with that. Water, wastewater. So I cover the whole spectrum.
You're right.
Because every industry have a nature and different challenge to overcome.
Well, of course, right? Some are going to be, food and beverage. We've got sanitation or wash down, so we're battling water. When we get into oil and natural gas, now we've got heat. Varnish is a big issue.
That's the basic.
Yeah. So it makes sense. Now, when you go into a facility, and obviously you've been, well-traveled, throughout the planet, what do you think is, more related to issues facing people in the Middle East in terms of reliability? I know that, there could be maybe some cultural differences here. There obviously environmental differences compared to different places. But what do you see people facing?
Yeah, the most common mistake and fault that holds people back, from my vast experience, is they don't make categories of failure. So categorization of failure properly.
Okay.
So
is it because they're just too worried about getting the machine back up and running?
Yeah, you just want to get the machine back up and running. And then with they wrap quickly the RCA. And then when I go to they ask me for help. Okay, we have a certain repetitive problem or a challenge, or we need to improve some KPIs. So when I go there, the first thing I with the guys say, are your failure list? Give me what happened. Okay, that's what I need to improve. The Pareto rule 20-80. I need those 20% of the failures that's happening 80% of the times.
Right.
Or like I explained it, if you go back to your high school class, 20% of the students is responsible for 80% of the problems and the downtime. So it's a nature law.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how I explain it. So when we get those categories, because now we have more experience in specific industries. Okay, guys, I think you're missing on varnish, for example. Okay. You don't see that they have recorded properly all those varnish-related failures, which is a lubricant-based failure.
Sure.
Or contamination.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
So maybe they have 3 or 4 failures that are very widely. Lubricant got dark.
They're just not generic.
Exactly. So when we start breaking those failures down, okay, how about you have a bearing failure? Why? We need to know what happened. How you detect this. So when you do this categories properly, all of a sudden, all the reliability improvement you want to do will make sense.
Right.
You will see missing opportunities. And also people get stuck for years on some of the cases that actually is not that important. There's more stuff that's
has a bigger impact.
Exactly. For example, everybody have a turbine in their facility, an oil and gas facility, power plant.
Sure.
So let's take a refinery as an example. So they have like 4 turbines driving the whole facility, but they have like 1,800 pumps on process.
Right.
Okay, and then I do a game with them. Okay, guys, could you tell me the collective amount of money you spent on the 1,800 pumps for maintenance costs, direct maintenance costs, and what did you do with the turbines? And we do that over a span of 5 years, okay?
Okay.
And discover that the majority of their money is wasted on those small little assets that are repetitive all over the place.
Yeah, but they're looking at it individually. They say, well, this one pump.
Just one pump.
But they don't ever look at the balance of the plant or something.
Exactly. And once we do that, okay, now those pumps is costing us actually in 5 years more than when you spend it on the whole turbine system. You're spending all the conditionatory resources, all the reliability resources. Everybody is focused on this big turbine because if it fails, it's a big problem.
Right.
A lot of downtime. But what about this hole in your pocket that's leaking money all the time?
Yeah.
And you need to, this is a problem to fix. It's somebody have to address that.
Right.
And it's mostly people that don't understand what they're doing because it's a simple pump. So send the new guys in to do it. It's a pump, but nobody that's not experienced go near the turbine. So this kind of improvements that have been working, and I showed many of my customers and friends that that's actually where you can improve quite quickly. That's low-hanging fruit that you don't see.
Because they're focused on the critical asset.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, starting with something that's less critical or something that, and when you look at the total effect, this is the whole Pareto principle. The total effect outweighs, maybe in this case, the critical asset. That's not to say that the critical asset's not important.
We have enough attention by this time, we can say.
It already has attention. There you go. It's already getting taken care of to some degree.
Yeah.
Now, we go further with this, right? So the environment, right? I know that when I go into, since we're using oil and gas, I go to the refinery here in Tulsa. And our environment, we're buying the same machines that y'all are buying.
Absolutely.
But our environment's completely different. And I know that, what would you say, the pitfall that people get into is they just follow OEM recommendations, not maybe crossing that OEM recommendation versus the environment that they're truly working in.
Absolutely.
The same?
Absolutely. It's a big problem that we have back because, as you said, you could have the same piece of equipment working here in the States or working in Saudi Arabia or in Qatar or Oman, in Egypt and Libya, and that's like in the middle of the desert, okay?
Sure.
So kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of sand.
Yeah.
So we have different challenges. Our temperatures are relatively higher than you. So the average temperature it could be 50 in the GCC area.
Yeah, 50 C, so that's going to be, what is that, like 115, 120 Fahrenheit?
Yeah. It could be a little bit cooler on the Mediterranean coast, but you have a high humidity, very high humidity.
Sure.
So what the OEM specified in the catalog was based on his perspective or imagination how the machines should operate. And sometimes they would like to think that this machine will be pampered, okay? It's going to be treated with delicacy, but that's actually not going to happen. It's going to be put in the middle of the desert in a very hot environment, very abrasive sand, high humidity, and here you go. So my customers...
It's incredibly abrasive.
Exactly, yeah. My customers think that those OEMs was carved in stone. No, it was not carved in stone. It's a piece of paper.
If you're not doing what the OEM says, then you're messing up first and foremost.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the biggest arguments that we always have and we always support people to talk to, okay, they have a famous turbine manufactured pump generator gearbox, okay? Okay, guys, get me on the emails with you, okay? I will do the argument with them. Because if you have data, that's not an opinion anymore.
That's right. It's fact at that point, right?
Exactly. And then they get surprised that after some emails and negotiation, maybe come to meeting, the OEM comes back, okay, yeah, we should do what your consultant said is actually going to be beneficial for the machine, for your site. And then they discover that a bunch of failures have disappeared.
And this could be something as simple as, hey, we need to go up one ISO code because we run hotter than what the manufacturer may understand.
Yeah.
So it's not make it huge changes. Sometimes they could be just
slight changes, or maybe we add a different micro-rating filter or a kid loop filtration.
There you go.
This kind of stuff, because if you work in a complicated equipment like a turbine, the customers are quite afraid. They want to change anything, they have to get their OEM approval.
Right.
So we have to help them and guide them through the process, how they should do it. Even lubricant suppliers as OEMs, when the customers start getting educated, they understand now. They could understand what's written on the data sheet. Now they can compare it to what's happening on their machine. They go back to the OEM of the lubricants. Oh, I need this lubricant instead of that lubricant.
Yeah.
And that's why, because I see this and that and that. And then they argue a little bit back and forth, but they know, they have evidence. They have maybe run some ONS reports, condition monitoring data, and it actually works out. So empowering people with knowledge is my passion, actually. I like to teach them.
So I want to dwell there for just a little bit. So, with a lot of customers that I work with, you're starting to see a lot more people that are going to get more formalized, trained, certified in lubrication, vibration, ultrasound, any number of things. What's the willingness the customers that you work with to actually train their staff? Are they eager to do this? Does it take convincing? What does that look like?
Okay, so there are two scenarios usually.
Okay.
So the one of the scenarios is the company that have KPIs and objectives that those employees have to achieve. Okay.
Okay.
That's a good way to do it. And then those guys comes back. Okay, so in order to do what you asked us to do, we need to learn that course or take that certification, and it helps in the company ISO accreditation. So every oil and gas company have to follow some standards. One of the standards an amount of employees he trained annually. And then we have the other case scenario. So people actually do the same thing over and over and over again for many years. And all of a sudden, something happened that changed the game for them. Maybe a competitor on the market, or one of the big car manufacturers in Egypt. He attended many of my seminars, many of my talks about the reliability and condition monitoring. But then, 2 years back, there was a big problem in the pricing on the cars in Egypt. People stopped buying, and they called me because now the director of the company, we need to reduce cost. So they remember that one of the way to reduce cost is reliability. So cost reduction is the second thing.
Absolutely.
I go in, I start working with them, and actually, we saved in one of their facilities actually one simple failure that was happening that gonna cost them like 21 cars per quarter.
So they're looking at how it impacts manufacturing.
Exactly.
Right.
So when we put this simple business case in front of the director of the company, so one failure that we worked in and we solved it, and you will be saving every 3 months 21 cars that was production losses because of downtime. So I said, okay, where do I send the PO?
Well, and I mean, everyone's going to be, what would you say, motivated differently, right? Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's, throughput. I know that you were speaking recently about like CO2 and carbon credit and stuff.
And you gave me change it, yeah.
Yeah, that's becoming more and more, what would you say, important? I mean, that's becoming front of mind. Yeah. And I guess there in the Middle East, you're seeing the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. All companies now in the Middle East have what we call carbon credits.
Sure.
So let's say that we talk about the pencil in your hand. So this pencil will be costing the environment a certain amount of CO2 to be produced, and because it makes sure manufacturing, shipping it from point to point until it reaches the end user. Okay.
Right.
So now all the industries that are heavy in CO2 emission and energy consumption, they have furnaces, they have reactors, and so they use a lot of energy. That means they produce a lot of CO2. We have to reduce the CO2 footprint of the facility under a certain limit.
No, it's whether they produce it, but they're still consuming it. So it may not make a big difference.
Exactly. So if you talk about a refinery, for example, so basically they are processing crude oil, or an upstream company, they are processing crude oil. So they have a target to go below certain amount of CO2 reduced.
Okay.
So it would look like that they are buying the customer share. So if I produce the fuel you put in your car, I'm buying your CO2 emission on my account. So you could run your car with my fuel without hurting the environment anymore. So let me give you an example. So one of the big domains for CO2 reduction, which people started discovering recently in the Middle East, and I'm working with them, that if you extend your lubricant life and you have a clean, cool, dry lubricant, the machine will be consuming much less energy.
That's right. And there's energy savings.
Yeah, and 1 liter of oil is going to cost the environment 4.8 kilograms of CO2 just to get it to your facility.
So now we're talking about extending the oil change.
Absolutely. If you do it right, so instead of lasting this oil like 2 years, 3 years, let's double it, let's triple it. And that's doable, actually. Many people have succeeded in that. But it's not now the financial gains we're looking for. So one medium-size gas turbine, if we extend if we double the lifetime of the lubricant in it, which is quite easy.
Well, hold on. You say medium-sized turbine. Put some surroundings around it. How much volume of lubricant?
So let's talk about anywhere between 5,000 and 8,000 liters. That's a medium-sized turbine. Okay. 5,000, 8,000 liters turbine. If we double the lifetime of the lubricant, that's 5,000 cars running for 4 years.
There you go. So that's a significant amount of savings at that point.
So the customers started looking at that. Okay, we need to save on our CO2 credits, okay, because there are other failures in the process that we cannot avoid.
Okay.
That's really unavoidable. It's really troublesome. Maybe the quality of the gas changes for a month or something like that coming out of the well, and that's going to cause more energy to process.
Okay.
So there are a lot of low-hanging fruits, a lot of potential to save those CO2 credits, to reduce the CO2 consumption inside the facility. One of the things we have been working actually is that we could actually now have a device that measure the total amount of losses due to friction inside a contactless bearing or a gear.
Okay, so now you're going by point.
Exactly.
And then, okay, you use the example of 1,800 pumps. So you go to one of them and say, all right, here's what I'm finding. We multiply this across 1,800 pumps. I mean...
Exactly.
Frictional losses, whatever it may be, could be substantial.
Exactly. And we measure those, and we improve the lubrication process either by proper selection, no contamination, and we could measure actually the reduction of losses, and it's translated in actual electrical reduction. And then they put that in a report. They submit it to the authorities in every country, And actually, if they go below the target of the carbon credits, so they don't consume them, they actually get paybacks.
Okay.
So they get better
Tax incentive.
tax incentives and everything, yeah. And that means that they're going to be saving so much than you could imagine. That's really good money. And everybody's looking at it now. So even some major companies in the Middle East is having what we call the net zero carbon target by 2030.
By 2030, which is, I mean, let's be honest, looks to be around
The day after tomorrow.
Yeah, right. I mean, 5 years. I mean,
Exactly.
Now 6. I mean, we're at the end of 2020.
Exactly. So they have a target now that their production should be so environment friendly in every point in the process. They look deep into so many details that we're buying whatever we're producing that is going to be consumed. There's going to be, we already bought from the customer the CO2 he's going to emit using our products.
Okay.
So it's going to be like target friendly. So some major car manufacturer has started their own wind parks. So they produce a car completely with wind energy.
Right.
And that means that this car will run for 4 years without any CO2 problems. So they both, it's green energy
ahead of time.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply for every industry. Oil and gas cannot do that, okay? Food and beverage cannot afford to have a wind park service.
Right.
So there are other ways. And this something is going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger because, you know, but either, I know some people would believe that there is something called climate change. Some people would argue about it. But let's put the scenario. What if this is actually a truth? Okay, we don't have any other planet to go to. So let's act on.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting told that we're running a little bit low on time here, but I want to be a good host and I want to give you the last word. So if you're going to give anyone advice, you know, whether they're in the Middle East, whether they're here in the States and they're talking about their reliability program, we've talked about RCA, what advice, you know, from your experience? I mean, you got a vast amount of experience. Where would you tell people to start? Where would you tell people to start looking?
Okay, if you want to start looking, you have to start for what I like call, if you know the Rolex watch, the most expensive gear in this watch is the smallest one that actually make it accurate, okay?
Okay.
So don't overlook small details, repetitive small events, okay? Those small things that happening actually, that's where your opportunity is going. That's where you're losing money. And from 18 years of experience in the field, don't ignore lubrication and oil analysis. There is huge untapped potential over there. In every facility, even if they think they have a world-class program, there is still more room to grow. And the good thing when you improve that part, you're not only saving money today, but you're reducing your failure rate for the future.
That's right.
So it's like an investment. It never dries out. It's year after year after year, you're getting more money out of it. So many reliability programs that I have been working. So I visited basically 5 continents and worked in 5 continents. And everybody is not tapping this potential correctly. So this is something that you have to start paying attention more.
Yeah. Man, I love that. The most expensive gear is the smallest one inside that watch.
Rolex watch, yeah.
I think that's a fantastic analogy. I mean, it speaks to what you're saying about don't get blinded by the forest and miss the trees or exactly. All right. Well, Mina, I very much appreciate you stopping by. This has been great. I hope you can come back. I'd love to do more of this with you.
Sure.
And for everyone else here at Gear Talk, I'm Wes. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe. That really helps us out. And as always, if you have any topics or any suggestions that you'd like us to cover, you can always email us at podcast@noria.com. But we'll catch you next time right here on Gear Talk.